Somebody had claimed my child for years, and nothing that we did could prevent them from claiming that child. And finally, I think like 3 or 4 years later, I found out what to do. So we're going to talk about that as well. So what are some of the other things that we need to be on the lookout for?
And be on the lookout for your preparer. Be very vigilant when you are looking for a preparer. Now, if you're looking for somebody that you just want to get money, you and them both can end up in jail. Now, if you want someone to do it right, ask questions. And if they can answer those questions, a good preparer, a good practitioner, you should be able to call them on the phone. You should be able to give them block 1 and block 2, and they should be able to tell you what your estimated taxes is, what your refund would be, or what your balance due will be. So you shouldn't have to go in. You shouldn't have to give them your social. You shouldn't have to do anything. They should be able to look at that paper, or you can call them if they're your preparer, and they should be able to give you that information. That's a good preparer.
So let's talk about identity theft, because people are stealing Social Security numbers. They're stealing Social Security numbers to your kids, claiming them. And like I said, when it first happened to me, I don't know exactly when it happened. I had an episode where my purse was stolen one time. And then I had another episode. I know that wherever I take my son, my daughter always go, because they're 13 months apart.
Right.
So every school except for one school that I applied for, and that at the last minute, we decided to send him somewhere else. And I'm like, did it happen there? But somebody had been claiming him for years. And we always, file our taxes late. It's like they do it the first day. And when we go in, one year we said, okay, we're going to do it early. We're going to try to beat them. And sure enough, when we went in, it got kicked back. Somebody had already claimed him.
Certain things we cannot prevent. And theft, unfortunately, is one of those things that we can't prevent. And stealing identity is something you can't prevent. You will go crazy trying to figure out where did they get my Social Security number from. It could have come from the driver's license, the state office. We've had a case in the state of Alabama where someone at the revenue office had taken a computer home and was selling identities. So it could come from anywhere.
Wow.
But I would beware of tax preparers that clump together. Because if you are a professional and you're proficient in this is something you do every day. This is not something you jump up and do at tax season. So they have these gamuts that they run, some companies, and some person sitting somewhere making a lot of money in the background, because when they get these young girls and guys and make them think money that they're going to make, they jump because it's quick. But this is a knowledge-based business. You cannot jump in it in October and think you're going to be proficient in January. So you have to beware. If they just start doing taxes and they're not working for someone who's been doing it for a decade or more, who's being supervised by somebody that's been doing this every day for a decade or more, be very aware, because your information could very well be on that list that's going to be pulled and be sold.
So what can you do? Because we went through a number of different things. What do you recommend?
I recommend
if you know somebody's identity has been stolen.
The IRS has an identity theft section, and that's all they deal with is an identity theft. So I would recommend calling that number. Go to irs.gov, and you'll be able to get that number, or you can call the Inspector General's office. Every tax preparer is supposed to supply you with that number for the Inspector General for the Treasury Department. So you're supposed to have access to that, because you're going to call that number if you're suspicious about them while they're doing your taxes, or you're suspicious about anything else. And I would say get an advertisement. A lot of these people love to get on Facebook, but Facebook is their demise, whether they know it or not, because once they put that advertisement that we do this, and when you see people say we can get you the max refund, the IRS frowns on that. They cannot tell you that because they control not what the IRS is going to do. All they can do is submit the information.
So they give you the number, and what happens from there?
And then there'll be an investigation. That's what an Inspector General is in the government. Is called Inspector General. with us, it's called a DA's office. But with the government, they call them inspector generals, and they inspect and make and find out what happened, and they will inspect that prepare. They will send somebody out. You know, there's gonna be trouble if it's to be seen. Then you will be issued an identity theft number. You will get a different PIN every year in January.
Now that's something I did not know. So
every year you gotta have a different PIN.
I got a PIN, and I was told, and I went to the IRS office because I had got tired of this happening every single year. We file our taxes, it gets kicked back. And then they say, okay, take him off. That's what the tax preparer told us.
No.
Take your child off.
No.
Go ahead and get your refund. Then we're going to file an amendment.
No.
Tell them what, I'm telling you what was told. File an amendment. And then they will do an investigation and find out who had claimed them. Then if you have your documents proving that this is your child, they're going to ask them the same thing. And, eventually we get our refund. So that's what we did for a number of years. But then we got tired of having to wait, 2 to 3 months before we can get our refund.
Yes.
So I went down to the IRS office.
Good move.
And I told them, hey, this has been going on year after year. What can we do? And they was like, oh, you let us do your taxes. And then, we could stop this. And I was like, and I had called the IRS before that had happened and told them. And I begged them, hey, tell me who did this, because they wouldn't tell me.
Yeah, that'll create civil unrest.
Yes, and it was going to be some civil unrest. And so they wouldn't tell me who it was. So, after going through it again, so I finally got a PIN. And they was like, okay, this PIN you're going to use every year you file your taxes. And they have changed their rule.
Yes, you will use a different PIN. Every year you'll be issued a different PIN. You can also get PINs for your dependents, not just for the taxpayer, but the dependent's identity is at risk now. So now you can get a PIN for your dependents.
They didn't touch me. They didn't touch my daughter. And like I said, everybody's Social Security card was in my wallet. The only one that was affected was my son. And that's why I said the only school that I could think of that he went, I had applied to, but he didn't actually go, was that particular school.
But it probably wasn't that school. So we can't, it's hard to narrow that down. It's just like trying to find a needle in a haystack. It's when you're everywhere. So you can't narrow it down to just that school. A lot of times our focus is in the wrong place because a thief works while we sleep. In a sense,
Yeah.
So they work while we're resting.
And then one thing that I learned too, because I spoke to someone at the IRS and they said, the reason why it keeps happening is because they may use that number and then they get caught, they sell it.
Yes.
And then somebody else use it,
Yes.
they get caught and they sell it again. Because I was like, why does this keep happening if every single year we're saying, hey, this is a problem, we're reporting it, we're calling, and she was like, because they're selling the number. Yes.
If you would, and anybody have access to this information, the Department of Justice, they have a whole section just based on for taxes. So what's going on with theft and tax preparers and who they're locking up, and they have a whole section on their website.
Okay.
So you can kind of, I would advise taxpayers to read up, and they'll tell you which companies. They will list the companies to be aware of.
Okay, Department of Justice.
Right. They will tell you who's been sanctioned. And a lot of tax preparers don't know because they go to an office, somebody say, I'm going to train you. They're going to train you. They're going to train that tax preparer on how to use software because they can't train them on the law when they don't know the law. I'm talking about tax laws. So they train them how to use software and how to maximize what they're going to get in their pocket as the tax preparer, but they're not telling them how to benefit their client. The goal is for your client to come back every year. You might get them this year, but they might not come back next year. So they're not training them in retention. They're just training them in robbery today. That's my perception of it. But so because they're only starting to train them in, let's say, September, October, it took me years to learn this. I'm still at a standstill to see how can somebody learn this from October to December. It's just not possible. That publication is yay thick. So how are you going to do that? You know, and you're going to need experience. So you need to be supervised by somebody with experience, not somebody with the goal to make money, get on Facebook and flash. So you have to be aware of that. And I would encourage tax preparers who feel like they don't get a lot of clients because they don't do a lot of things. But hear me when I tell you, you're doing what's right. It'll come.
Yeah, and that's been a concern of some of my clients have been, before all these people started popping up, it was nothing for me to do 200, 500 tax returns in a season. And, I'm barely scraping the pot now and that's because you have all these people that say, hey, you come over here, I can get you $6,000. I can get you $5,000. You can walk out here today with some money. And so,
don't worry. It takes me to the book of Habakkuk. Habakkuk. Am I saying it right?
Habakkuk.
Okay. So in there, that's a prophet, and he was concerned and he was worried, like some taxpayer might be, but he was worried for different things. He was worried because it seems like there was no judgment against the ones who were doing bad. So he went to God and he was really concerned, like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And I can feel some taxpayer feeling like that who are doing the right thing. And this prophet was doing the right thing. And he's concerned because it seemed like the bad people are getting ahead. And God said, hey, I'm working. Trust. God is working. He answered him. He answered the prophet. And he told him he's working. So even when you see somebody doing something bad, God is still working. You still got to have the same belief. Because it appears that judgment is not rendered. It's judgment is not swift.
Judgment delayed is not denied.
Exactly. So it's working, but it's working for you who are doing right. So just continue to do right, and just to continue to take that time to grow your business and diversify. So even in your times you think are hard, they're not hard. That's just time you have to diversify. Because that's what I did in my business. So that's why I do several things. I do payroll for several companies, and I offer electronic payrolls where they clock in on a device that I provide, and that information is relayed to me at my desk from that device. So you can diversify, and it all has to do with taxes. So there are so many things that you can do. So take that time because they're coming back, because just like with the prophet, people really want to do right. They just sometimes get caught up in doing wrong. So you just be there waiting for them, but you'll be more the wiser when they do come back. And you'll be able to say, hey, the IRS regulation is this. Okay, because of the PATH Act, we have to do this. And we also have some things that people are going to have to go back and do for 2018 and 19, because there was a law just signed that the president signed, and he signed it late. He signed it on December the 20th, and it was a Consolidated Appropriations Act. So that means that when we couldn't take for mortgage premiums and all that, they did away with. Well, how about they're back? So you can go back and do your taxes. But hear me when I tell you, the IRS is not ready. Their computers are not ready for that. So you can't do it just yet. So that your tax preparer has an obligation to let you know when you can come back, look at your stuff, look at your files, and see if it would be efficient for you to go back and amend your taxes. Will it be, don't do anything that's going to cost them, but do things that's going to benefit them.
So if someone has been to a tax preparer that was, maybe not as knowledgeable or may have given incorrect information, what can they do to rectify that? Do they just live with the decision, okay, I had, they didn't, like in the case of my child, they kept saying, take them off, add them back on in an amendment.
I wouldn't say that. I would say if your taxes came back rejected once you prepared those taxes, so they came back rejected, right? So what you do is you take it and you file it. It's considered at that point more like an imperfect return. You're just going to file paper, and that tax preparer has to include a form in there that tells the IRS why this is coming in paper, because every tax preparer that e-file, if you e-file more than 10 tax returns, you must e-file them all. Okay. So if you have to send one in paper with your signature and they see your P10, well, you are in the system, you've already filed this many, that form has to be included.
Okay.
So to let the IRS know why this return is coming in paper.
Okay. So amendments can be done if you think that there may have been